Welcome to the broadcast. Governor Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, joins us for a wide-ranging conversation today on education, the economy, public safety, technology, and accountability in government. As always, this conversation is candid, thoughtful, respectful about where Maryland is headed and how decisions are made today by those that shape our lives for tomorrow. Let me welcome the Honorable Wes Moore to our broadcast. Governor, thank you again for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Great to be on with you.
Governor, by the end of 2026, what would success look like for Maryland? And what are two, or let's say three measurable outcomes you would want voters to be able to point to?
Well, I want people to see that we keep our promises. You know, that we said that we were going to actually tackle the hard problems. And, you know, we've been really encouraged by the results that we've been able to see on a variety of different levels. That, you know, when we first came on board, we saw how there was an absolute violence crisis that existed within our state, that our state had gone over an 8-year period. We've seen the homicide rate nearly double, the non-fatal shooting rate did double, and Baltimore City went 8 straight years of 300+ homicides unabated. Well, we're now looking at, coming to a close of this year, where we have seen amongst the fastest drops in violent crime anywhere in the United States of America. And it's not just Baltimore City that you're seeing the drops, where, yes, in Baltimore City, the last time the homicide rate was this low, I wasn't born yet. But look all across the state. Look at Prince George's County, where the homicide rate is now down 45%. The carjacking rate is down 55%. That we have now seen where robbery and also the property crimes are down 50%. So we are seeing this across the state of Maryland, where our focus on being able to work with local law enforcement, making historic investments in local law enforcement, make historic investments in our state's attorneys, with our state's attorneys association and with our prosecutors academy, making sure there's greater levels of accountability by being able to use technologies and predictive analytics to be able to stop crime before it happens and make sure there's real accountability.
But what do you, Governor, what do you say?
We're working with the U.S. Attorney.
What do you say to those that don't see those results? Remain impacted by crime, youth violence, youth theft, disruptions with businesses that have had to close down because of this violence. What do you say to those that know what you're saying is factual, but it's not true for where they are?
Well, I would say that if one person does not feel safe in their neighborhoods, that's one too many. That's why we have said that public safety is our #1 priority, making sure that people can feel safe in their neighborhoods, in their communities. And I think the people of our state have seen that I will stop at nothing to make sure that there is real accountability, that if someone commits a violent crime with a firearm, I want them in handcuffs in 24 hours. That we need to make sure that we're creating real pathways of opportunity for our young people. So we know there's still more work to do. As long as one person doesn't feel safe, that we are going to continue our work. But the progress that we have made after years of seeing no progress at all is important to note, because what we are showing for the people of our state, whether you're talking about public safety, whether you're talking about economic growth and job growth rates, we have one of the fastest job growth rates inside of the country, despite the fact that what we're seeing with this assault on our federal workers, that we're having new initiatives that are fighting child poverty, and actually that we've now had over 35,000 new businesses start in the state of Maryland since I've been the governor, that we're showing in our state we know how to do big things, and we are on pace to doing just that.
So let me move the conversation to the General Assembly. During a recent special session that you called, the General Assembly overrode your veto to create a reparations commission. What does that moment say about your working relationship with, let's say, the legislative leaders? And also in that same session, veto overrides reinstated climate-related research and a data center impact study, which I know is important to you. Can you walk viewers through your original concerns and how you view those issues now, and how do you intend to work with this legislature going forward?
Yeah, I was very clear with the legislature in last session, where I said that I don't think that now is the moment for passing unfunded mandates, or this idea that we should use this moment to pass multi-year studies or analysis or research where we have to move with a sense of urgency. I am very much a do it now kind of leader. And we want to make sure that we do not miss this moment. And I feel like we have to be a state that goes from no and slow to yes and now. And so there were a handful of bills. In fact, more bills than any Democratic governor in the history of the state of Maryland by 5x. I vetoed last year because I felt like the criteria that we laid out for the bills that I wanted to be able to continue working with the legislature on, that there were certain bills that made it to my desk that did not hit the criteria. I am still very eager to work in partnership with the legislature. I respect the legislative branch as I respect the judicial branch, as they should respect the executive branch. We all have our roles and our responsibilities. And I look forward to working with them to be able to bring real measurements of prosperity to the people of our state, to make sure that we are getting our state budget under control, to make sure we're passing legislation that moves with a sense of urgency that I know the people of our state require right now.
You know,
and so
many
I look at the fact that we have
Americans,
disagreements is one thing.
Many Americans, governors, say affordability is their top concern. And as you look ahead to this legislative session, how are you balancing revenue needs with the cost of living pressures families are feeling every second?
Well, it's interesting because I think when people talk about affordability is basically just what we were saying in 2022, where if people were saying in 25 the issue was affordability, we said that in 2022, when I was first elected governor, that we've got to focus on work, wages, and wealth. That's just affordability, in just another way of saying it. And so we're really proud of the work we've done thus far to be able to open up pathways into the workforce. We have quadrupled the amount of apprenticeship and trade programs that we have in the state of Maryland, gotten rid of the idea that high schools should be evaluated exclusively on your four-year college acceptance rate. Being able to have the largest mass pardon in the history of the United States of America, where we pardoned over 175,000 misdemeanor cannabis convictions to get people back into the workforce. That we have raised the minimum wage in the state of Maryland and making sure that people who are working jobs, and in some cases multiple jobs, don't have to live at or below a poverty line. And we've opened up pathways to home ownership, made it easier for people to be able to buy homes by opening up more inventory and making sure we can build more homes faster, supporting our businesses and our entrepreneurs. And so affordability is an important component. You are going to see in this next session, we're going to focus on things like energy cost and energy prices. You're going to see in the next session, we're going to make it a little bit easier for people to get a break at their supermarkets. So you are going to see how that's going to continue to be an issue that this administration is going to focus on. But the way we are going to do it is creating pathways to work, wages, and wealth for all people in the state of Maryland.
You know, Governor, Maryland has seen significant federal job losses this year. What specific steps will your administration take to support these displaced workers and protect the broader contracting ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a really important point because there is no state that's been hit harder by these federal job losses than the state of Maryland. We have over 260,000 federal employees in our state. And even before the federal government shutdown, we saw how over 15,000 Marylanders have been fired. And these are people who are doing things like making sure that our food is safe and making sure that our planes are not colliding and making sure that our veterans are getting the proper supports that they need. And so immediately we jumped into action to make sure that our federal workers were going to be supported and not left behind. That we started a nation-leading initiative called Feds to Eds, where we actually got federal workers who were interested in going into the classroom and actually then were working and actually streamlined them to become teachers inside of our classroom. And just in our time as governor, we have now seen how we have cut the teacher shortage in the state of Maryland by half. Some of the fastest growth and some of the fastest jumps in getting rid of the teacher shortage that we've seen in this country are happening in the state of Maryland. And many of those people are people who are federal workers who we've now gotten into the classroom. That we've been able to get more federal workers into places like hospitals to become nurses and to become PAs and en route to become doctors. And so we want to make sure that their skills are being put to use, in addition to the fact that the reason that we have amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, that Maryland's unemployment rate right now is 3.6%, which is about a full point lower than the national average, is because the private sector has been on a hiring spree. that since I've been the governor, we've added over 100,000 new jobs in the state of Maryland, and the vast majority of those have been in the private sector. And so they see the talent that we have in our state. They see the educational pipeline. And so while this federal government assault that we are seeing on our federal government workers has been disproportionately impacting the state of Maryland, I'm really proud how Maryland has responded in this moment.
You know, Maryland is diverse, both geographically, as you stated, and economically. How do you ensure Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore feel equally represented in these statewide decision-making process?
You know, when I first ran for governor, I ran on a slogan that I learned in the military when I was 17 years old, leave no one behind. And that has been the focus of our work, is making sure that those communities that have oftentimes been left out of the conversation have now been put to the front of the conversation. And I think you just have to take a look at an issue like healthcare, where if you look at what's happened on the federal side, that we have now had over $250 million that has been taken from rural hospitals in the state of Maryland, intentionally, rural hospitals in the state of Maryland. Well, how did we as a state respond? We've actually invested in healthcare in rural Maryland. That we've now invested to create the first new hospital in the Eastern Shore, the University of Maryland Regional Medical Center, that's going to be built out in Easton, Maryland, that's going to be able to serve 6 different counties. That is a generational investment in rural healthcare over in the Eastern Shore. That we've now built a new medical school, first new medical school that we've built in generations. And do you know where it is? Western Maryland. To make sure that we're both training medical leaders inside of Western Maryland, but also then incentivizing them to stay out in Western Maryland to be able to support our populations in Allegheny and Garrett and Washington and Frederick counties. And when we saw that they had historic floods out in Western Maryland, you know, where literally some of the largest floods that we have seen over in Allegheny and Garrett County, and even when the federal government decided to give not a single dollar in federal disaster relief, which we knew we qualified for, that what did we do in the state? We invested over $1 million in making sure that the people of Western Maryland could get back on their feet.
Governor,
and
hold
so
that point.
I'm really
Hold that
proud
point.
That not only.
I'm sorry. You know, we got to just come to a quick break. Much more when we come back with the Honorable
That's all
Governor
right.
of the state of Maryland, Wes Moore. We'll be back. And welcome back with our very special guest, Governor Wes Moore. Governor, there's a lot of controversy surrounding ICE. Obviously, these workers are only doing their jobs that the administration or the jurisdictions ask them to do. There's this perception that there's this legislation that's sweeping that some states want to arrest members of ICE for doing their jobs. You're a former military vet, decorated. You can relate very much because it's a war zone for them. How do you balance ICE doing their jobs and this new sweep that's coming from progressives?
Yeah, well, I think what we're seeing here is it's deeply unfortunate for everybody around, right? It's unfortunate for the communities and the community members who you know, and I've spoken with parents who have literally said that they're afraid to go pick up their children from school. And these are people who are here legally because they're afraid of these sweeps that are taking place. That it's unfortunate for the members of law enforcement who, to your point, are doing their job but find themselves, unfortunately, being put in situations that, frankly, are not fair to them or their family members either. And I know this issue is a very personal issue because this is a personal issue for me where, you know, I was raised by an immigrant single mother. You know, I know that we have an immigration system that is functionally broken, and it's been broken for a very long time, and that Congress has a unique responsibility and obligation to fix it, and they have not. And so now you have local jurisdictions that are now having to deal with the debris that comes from these broken systems. And so, the thing that we know, and where I very, very much stand on this, is there's two things that I want to focus on for my communities. One is, as I mentioned before, public safety is my number one priority. I want to make sure that the people in our communities are safe, and I want to make sure that particularly violent offenders, that we are removing them from our society. And frankly, I could care less about their documentation status. I want violent offenders being accountable for their actions. And the other thing that I know is I believe in the Constitution, and I will support the Constitution, and I will follow the Constitution. The challenge that we have seen from the actions of some of the ICE members that that we've seen, again, not just in Maryland, but really this is a phenomenon across the country, is whether it doesn't seem like the same commitment to both violent offenders and following the Constitution. And so we need for Washington to get in the game on this. We need for Congress to be able to do its job to make sure that ICE has clear understanding of its roles and responsibilities, that communities understand where the boundaries are actually lying, because that lack of understanding and that nuance is frankly what's causing the fear in both the community members and also the ICE members who are then asked to do these jobs.
But basically you are saying, because you follow the Constitution, as governor, you will also protect ICE in their role.
Yeah, I follow the Constitution. Absolutely.
So,
and it's important for people to have a real clear constitutional understanding of what's authorized. It's the reason, that I've also said when it comes to state state-led law enforcement, that, when people are like, well, will the state do this or will the state do that? My answer is the state follows the Constitution, and we're not going to shade on one side or another to ensure that the Constitution is actually being followed. It's very clear where the laws are where the laws align.
You're very clear. You're very clear on that, Governor, and thank you for that. Are there areas where you believe, Governor, state government can operate more efficiently without compromising essential services?
Absolutely. One of the first hires that I made was a chief modernization officer, and a focus that we have within our state of saying, where can government be more efficient? Because one of the real frustrations that I do have is that oftentimes when you think about both from a budgeting perspective, how much of the budget is actually formulaic and it's not results driven, but it's also about where are the places that we can actually cut and be more efficient in the work that we are doing. Just through our government modernization initiative that we have in the state of Maryland, we have now cut over $50 million in this fiscal year alone by just doing the basics right, doing things like fleet management and doing IT consolidation and making sure that we are using our taxpayer dollars smartly and wisely. That we've now created platforms that really allow people to understand both where your government dollars are going, but then also seeing how we're using leveraged government dollars to be able to fight everything from child poverty to helping to secure more child care supports for our families. Absolutely, government can and should be more efficient.
So let me interrupt you there. So the blueprint for Maryland's future represents a major long-term investment in education. How do you, as governor, respond to concerns about its costs while maintaining its core goals?
I think the concerns that I've heard from both community members, the concerns that I've heard from local elected officials, the concerns that I've heard from parents, they are real. And now people know that I am, arguably one of the most public education governors that this state has ever seen. We've made historic investments in public education, but I'm also very clear that how much you invest is not an indicator on how successful the results you are driving are. The reason that we've been so successful in our results since in the past 2.5 years, and I give a ton of credit to Dr. Carey Wright, our school superintendent, that we've been able to cut in half the teacher vacancy rate, that on every single statistical category, we've seen improvements in math, improvements in reading, that we have jumped 20 states in reading for third grade reading level in just the past year under the leadership of Dr. Carey Wright. So we're really proud of the fact there's educational advancements that are being made. But I do think that just like any major piece of legislation that has gotten passed in our state or our nation's history, you constantly have to pressure test. Because I do know that when the blueprint was first passed, there were a few things that were in place then that were not in place now, or that have happened since then, that we did not know when that was being done. There wasn't an understanding that there would be a state administration, my predecessor, who was not going to fund it. That at that time when the blueprint was written, we didn't know what COVID was. And we're still dealing with the implications of COVID, and now dealing with the implications of the significant pullbacks that we've seen from the Department of Education, which have had very real impacts on rural education and particularly education for children with disabilities. So I think funding and supporting public education is crucial and will always be crucial, but I constantly think that we have to be able to pressure test to figure out whether the laws that we have on the books right now are best serving the people that we're hoping to serve.
Well, I think it's important that you point out this funding with accountability for student outcomes. But if you could adjust one lever, Governor, to improve school performance statewide, such as curriculum standards, school leadership, or flexibility at the local level, what would it be?
Well, I believe that on a lot of things that we are doing, these are the right things to do. That you've got to be able to start earlier. And things like how we're talking about for pre-K for all kids in need is important. I think we need to invest in career technical education and making sure that we're starting earlier for career technical education, because not every student should go to a 4-year college. That should not be the destination for every student, so we shouldn't pretend like that's the only goal that we have. That we have to focus on career development for our educators inside of our classroom and also the folks who are supporting the students in our classrooms. The challenge, though, is that we have to be focused on results-based governance and not formula-based governance. Results are the things that we have to constantly go after. And if that means making adjustments to produce the kind of results that we're hoping for, then we have to be unafraid to do that.
So, you recently announced new investments to support small businesses, child care, access to fresh food, because you understand the concept of these food deserts. How will success, Governor, be measured so taxpayers can see real returns in their investments?
Part of the reason that I'm incredibly excited about this investment is this is about what are we going to invest in that's going to have the highest return on the investment. Do you know the reason that we invest in childcare? It's because we should not be asking parents, and in many cases it's women, and asking them to choose between, are my kids going to be okay, or will I be able to go back into the workforce? By investing in childcare, you're investing in employment. By investing in employment, you're getting more people into the workforce and creating more taxpayers. And so and by investing in small businesses, the way where I am unapologetically pro-business. And we have to make it easier for businesses to be able to grow and succeed. It's the reason we put such a focus on things like permitting reform and regulatory reform and making it easier for businesses to choose Maryland and come and grow in the state of Maryland. And the reason we've done that is because when we have more economic growth, that is better for our state's GDP. Just before this interview, I just came back from Western Maryland over at Hercules, who just announced a massive expansion that they are going to be having out in Western Maryland. A few weeks ago, we just announced that AstraZeneca was making the largest singular private investment in the state of Maryland, a $2 billion investment that we have now seen in over a decade. And so I want business growth. I want to make sure we are beating these other states. I want to make sure we're putting the things in place to do that. But when you invest in childcare, when you invest in education, and when you invest in our entrepreneurs and our small businesses, you will produce the kind of long-term GDP growth that we're going to need as a state.
Many people find it challenging to look back over their years as governor and point to areas where you believe your administration has not measured up to voters' expectations, where there's room to improve. How would you address room for you as governor to improve for the Marylanders that you represent?
I think we have to be honest about it. We're not done. I'm proud of the progress that we had, but I did not run for governor because I was looking to make progress. I was running for governor because I actually wanted to accomplish all of our missions. And you know, while I'm proud of the fact that we have one of the fastest job growth rates inside the country, that we have added over 35,000 new businesses to the state of Maryland, while I'm proud of the fact that we have done procurement reform and given more capital and more state supports to women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses and small businesses, yes, I'm very proud of that. But we're not done. You know, that when I look at what we've been able to get done around public safety, when I look at the work we've been able to do
you're not answering my
around child
question.
poverty.
But you're not answering my question. Where can you improve?
Well, no, I think that's it. Is that where can we improve? It's all of it.
Okay.
Because we've got to move faster. That I'm proud of the results we've been able to show thus far. That, you know, you can look across the board. Our work around young men and boys, our work making Maryland the first state in the country that has a service year option for all of our high school graduates. The fact that we've been able to raise a minimum wage. The fact that we can get more people back to work. The fact that we've been able to create more homeowners. Am I proud of that? Absolutely, I'm proud of that. But I would be silly to sit there and rest on my laurels and say the job is done, or to just give myself a say, oh yes, we have an A+. And just keep it moving. No,
but you know,
I am way too aggressive and way too competitive for that.
But you know, many Americans will tell you, Governor, they're strapped for cash. They can't afford the grocery stores. Do you promise not to raise taxes or fees in this legislative session to give them relief?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I've been very clear. We're not going to raise taxes over this session. But I also know this. That can't be enough. We still have to provide more support than just simply saying we're not going to raise taxes. I mean, last year we gave the middle class a tax cut, but we still know that's not enough. And that's why even last year, where we've now given a rebate, energy rebates of $200 million back to the people. But I still know that when people are looking at their energy prices, energy prices for the past 10 months, because a lot of these federal policies that we've seen how energy prices have risen over 20% for people in this country. That we have seen how since the federal administration has come on board, and with tariff policies, we've seen how things like poultry and eggs are up 25%. Just yesterday, I was with the Maryland Farm Bureau, and they were talking about how fertilizer is now up 36% than what it was just 10 months ago. So we're seeing how a lot of our federal policies are forcing a lot of our people to become more strapped than ever before.
Hold that
but
point,
that's
Governor.
why I know that in this moment, it's not... Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Governor. Quick break, we'll be back.
No, that's...
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. So, Governor, where will we be with the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project in 2026?
Well, where we are is, and I've been very clear on this, I think the process that they have done on this has been absolutely despicable. We are looking at these multinational and multi-state operators that are now working with, and if you look at things like, PJM, they have 13 different states that they are the ones who are approving all of these various projects. And so when you are having this conversation about energy within our society, I get that we need to do more to be able to strengthen the grid. I'm a big believer that we need to think about all energy options. It's the reason why last year I actually introduced legislation to be able to have more nuclear options that are on board that the Maryland General Assembly did not go along with. But what I do not like, and what I do not think is fair nor right, is when you have these multi-state operators who are looking at a map as if people don't live there and then determining where these lines should go. We have farms, in some cases, of families that have been there for 10 and 12 generations who are now being told that they are going to have this run through their land without anyone having a conversation with them or with the local or state leadership on these issues. And so I have a very real issue about the way this is done, because I stand with the people on this. These political games that are taking place, and it took place long before I even thought about running for office a couple years ago. I'm just realizing we've got to put an end to that, and we have to have a better process where the people's voice is actually going to be heard and incorporated into these decisions.
You feel so strong about this. Why won't you give them an audience and meet with them?
Oh, I have met with them.
So
they have heard me loud and clear, and they've heard my frustration. Absolutely. I have met with them, and they've heard my frustrations loud and clear. But they haven't just heard my frustrations. They've heard the frustrations of other governors as well. And the fact that these decisions are being made and we don't have a seat at the table makes absolutely no sense to me. And so while I've met with them, do you know who I've also met with who resonate with me a whole lot more? These farmers. I've met with these families. And the thing that I can tell you is what is happening to them is not fair. That there has to be a better way of thinking about our future energy options and thinking about a strengthening of a grid, because I understand the need for that. But what I know is we have to make sure that our communities actually have a seat at the table on this.
So recent audits, Governor Moore, have shown billions spent by agencies with limited oversight. Before asking taxpayers for more, what spending will you rein in?
Well, I think you've seen that we have reined in spending at recently historic levels in the state of Maryland. The cuts we made last year to last year's budget, those are the largest cuts that any administration has made to Maryland's budget in 16 years. That this is an administration that since I have been the governor, that we have now introduced budgets that have actually decreased the size of the general fund every single year. I believe in fiscal discipline. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe that we need to be able to do more with less in many cases within our state. Because if you look at the 7 years before I became the governor, Maryland's budget increased by 70%, 7-0, in the 7 years before I became the governor. And you know what did not grow? Our GDP. So we were spending, but we were not growing. And so one of the things that I've been focused on is making sure that we can rein in the spending, that we can increase the top line, that's how you actually stimulate growth. And so those are the things that we are really zeroing in with this administration. Accountability, but also fiscal discipline that can end up growing more revenue and growing a larger GDP for the state.
I want to come back to the issue of crime, juveniles, the courts, and the General Assembly. If lawmakers, Governor Moore, propose expanding automatic adult charging for certain violent offenses, what factors would guide your decision? And also, where do you personally draw the line between juvenile reform and adult level consequences? Back to this accountability and responsibility. Consequences.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, accountability and consequences is something I believe in deeply. That you can both believe in accountability and opportunity. That we want to increase opportunity and increase accountability. And so the guidelines that I will have on any bill that makes it to my desk is I need to see data. That as an administration, we are very clear that I am data-driven and heart-led. That yes, that we are going to make decisions based on data. So emotive splurges will never win the day with me. Emotive splurges will not get me to sign a bill. I need to see data that shows what is the level of effectiveness and efficacy and sustainability that that bill is going to provide to our society, but knowing that there's two things, accountability and opportunity, that we need to be a society that increases both.
What do you believe, where do you believe, Governor, artificial intelligence can most responsibly improve government services as a Maryland in your state, and where you are clear on the boundaries?
Yeah, I actually think that this is, we can't pretend like AI is not already happening. I think anybody who's just sticking their head in the sand and saying, like, if we just don't talk about it, it won't come, is foolish. Because let's be clear, this is happening, and it's happening quickly. And it is a powerful technology that I think has the chance to do really, really good things for our society. I am optimistic about what I think AI can do for education, what I think AI can do for healthcare, what I think AI can do in terms of national security and public safety. So I am bullish about what I think the opportunities are, but I think we just need to be smart and intentional about the ways we are incorporating it. And frankly, I think it's, it's something that whether we look at the Biden administration, where I think that there was too restrictive a lens on the way they were looking at the hopes for AI. And I think, frankly, with the Trump administration, I think they've been too loose about the way we're looking at it. We need to strike the right balance of saying that this is something we have to establish the right kind of guardrails, but we also have to unearth the opportunities. If you look at what's happening in the state of Maryland, we've been utilizing AI for things like our Sunbucks initiative. So we've been using AI to be able to deal with the issue of hunger during the summers, that we created a partnership with Anthropic, that we're now utilizing AI to deal with the issue of child poverty. So I think this can be a very powerful tool that we can use, but at the same time, we have to be able to establish what are the guardrails, and we have to get ahead of it and not just let it happen to us.
With data centers developing, constantly expanding, Governor, how should Maryland balance economic growth with the infrastructure, the water, and energy demands? You've got this energy affordability remains a concern. How do you plan to keep electricity reliable and affordable while meeting long-term policy goals in your state?
Yeah, I think we as a state cannot think about this in just black or white terms, where it's just like, let the data center companies do whatever they want and turn it into Northern Virginia, or just stop all infrastructure from being built. I think just like anything, the extremes are not going to get you where you need to get to. That you need to have a balanced approach in the way you're doing this work. When I think about the industries of the future for the state of Maryland, our lighthouse industries, they really focus on three different areas. It's life sciences, it's IT, and it's aerospace and defense. And when you're talking about IT, you're talking about things like quantum. You're talking about things like cyber and AI. So one thing that we know is that energy is going to help to drive how we are going to achieve the things we need to achieve within our lighthouse industries. And so we have to be able to work with communities to make sure that this is being done sensibly. We have to make sure that this is not being done to communities, but with communities, in the way we're looking at energy resilience and grid resilience, and the way that water and capacity is being used. That I think when we're talking about data centers, that we need to be able to focus on those that are bringing their own energy, and not relying on external energy or relying on state grids to be able to lift and profile. But it's not about saying, oh, we're just going to let them run free like they did in Northern Virginia, but nor is it saying we're just going to stop all economic progress. I don't think either of those two things are the right answer.
Let me pivot to this then. The Revived Climate Impact Study continues to spark much debate. How should Maryland use this research when shaping future policy decisions? And, given recent federal job losses, should Maryland work toward a more diversified economy, and which sectors are key to that future?
One of the reasons that I have been so pro looking at some of these clean energy and alternative energy options is because of what you just mentioned. Because it's about jobs, and it's about increasing opportunities to bring down costs and bring down prices. I don't now understand how someone can say, well, we're concerned about the rising price of energy, and then you're also going to pull back on the various energy options. That the reason that we want to make sure that we have an energy approach that isn't all of the above energy approach, that is an energy approach that is looking at not just legacy items, but also saying, what are we doing to invest in solar and wind and nuclear? Part of the reason we want to do that is because it's going to increase supply. If you increase supply, you are going to also inevitably bring down costs, because what we're watching is an increase of demand. So if you watch an increase of demand of energy options, but you have a supply that is either flat or even declining, there's only one option that can happen: prices spike. And so I'm trying to protect the people. We're trying to protect ratepayers. And the best way you can do that is by both acknowledging that, yes, is climate change real? Absolutely. And it is an existential threat. However, the way we're going to deal with it is by making sure we're looking at a variety of different energy options so we can meet the increased demand that we have for energy, and at the same time making sure that it can be met with things that are clean, and making sure we can make sure that we have additional options that we can pull from.
Governor Wes Moore is our guest. I'm Armstrong Williams, your host, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
And welcome back to the broadcast. For full disclosure, several past biographical and professional questions have surfaced in some media about the governor. And I think these questions should be addressed for the record. But I want people to know that when Governor Wes Moore was a White House fellow, I was on the President's Commission of White House fellows. And I will tell you that when Governor Moore was selected, he was our top vote getter. His courage, his character, his integrity. And so I just want to make sure people understand that, Governor, you and I, it's where we met, at the President's Commission on White House Fellows. So I wanted, because I know you are a man of honor, and I just want to give you a chance to set the record straight on some of these issues. Okay, so let's talk about what was in the Washington Observer and your awardee of the International Relations from Oxford in 2005. I want to give you the chance of all these things out there about the Bronze Medal, Oxford, your thesis, for you, in your own words, to set the record straight and just move on.
Well, I'm thankful for my history, and I take my integrity seriously. I know that I was proud of the fact that despite being raised by an immigrant single mother, despite having handcuffs on my wrist by the time I was 11 years old, despite getting sent to military school when I was just turning a teenager, despite joining the Army when I was 17 years old, despite graduating from a 2-year college, that a few years after that, I was able to be announced as a Rhodes Scholar, the first Black Rhodes Scholar in the history of Johns Hopkins University. That I went to Oxford and got my master's degree in international relations with a focus on radical Islam in the Western Hemisphere. That I began my work on a DPhil before deciding to join back up with the military, and then got deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division, where I served and led soldiers in combat for something that I was, while I didn't serve for any award or medal, that's not why people serve. I was thankful that I became a decorated combat veteran, to include the Combat Action Badge and the Bronze Star that the military awarded me. But I know the thing that I'm most proud of right now is that I am a child of God who has gone into this work of being the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland with everything I've got, that I'm focused on making sure that we can end child poverty in our state, that I'm focused on making sure that we can create real economic opportunities for the people of our state, and they can have a government that they know is fighting for them and working for them. That I'm proud of the fact that we've been able to get really big things done, to include the work around the Key Bridge. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity that the people of this state gave me. And I'm thankful that I can continue to lead with a God-fearing honor and integrity that I think this moment requires.
What do you say to those that question the thesis with the Bulletin Library? Any comment on that?
I don't. I mean, this literally came from a blog post that I'd never heard of before. And so, while they want to spend time focusing on something that has been already disputed by Oxford University, the oldest English-speaking university in the world, I'm going to spend my time focusing on bringing pathways to work, wages, and wealth to the people of Maryland.
So, given the confusion, why not just release the thesis yourself if you have a copy of it?
Well, I am not going to spend a second of my time trying to dig up a paper that I wrote 20 some odd years ago because a right-wing blog post is asking me to. I'm too busy. I'm too busy focusing on making sure that we're dealing with the fact that we have people who are about to lose their health care, and passing legislation here in Maryland, making sure that we can actually have a premium assistance program in Maryland, making sure we're giving people assistance for the fact that their premiums are about to rise. I'm too busy making sure that when we're watching a federal government who's trying to cut SNAP and who's using food as a negotiating tool, that we in the state of Maryland, that we actually utilized our fiscal responsibility fund, which is actually a fund that is made up of capital gains, and taking $63 million from that to make sure that SNAP is not going to be interrupted for the families of this state, because they should not starve because the federal government can't get their act together.
Here's what I find.
And so my focus is on Maryland.
Let me tell you what I find fascinating, that you saw radical Islam as a concern way back over 2 decades ago, and you saw it as your passion, the study, and that you wanted to become an expert in Middle East studies. Talk about what you saw back then that's come full circle today, and talk about your experience as it relates to Middle East studies, outside of the other things that people already know about you. I like for people to understand things about you that they're not aware of.
Yeah, that I studied international relations in college, and my master's is actually in international relations. That actually working on foreign policy was really some of my first introductions into the policy world. And I did. You're absolutely right, Armstrong. Where years ago, now almost 25 years ago, I started to get an understanding of groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and Al Qaeda and the threat that they were posing to our society. And in many cases, before people knew exactly what Hamas or Hezbollah, actually was, or what they represented. And so you're absolutely right that it is a frame that I do take to the world right now. Part of the reason that I am just a firm belief that groups like Hamas will never be a part of a long-term peace process inside of the Middle East is because I know them too well. Not just as a soldier who led soldiers overseas, but as someone who had studied these groups, and actually, and again, my master's thesis was on this work. And so I'm very clear about what I believe a long-term peace should look like, that particularly if you're talking about the Middle East, that we need to have a process where both Israelis and Palestinians have a right to live peacefully inside of the region. And I also know that there are groups like Hamas that have never had an intention of being part of a long-term peace process, so I do not see that changing.
Bill Ferguson was just reelected as a Senate president. You have a new Speaker of the House. There are those that perceive that there's a strained relationship between you and the Speaker. What is the case, Governor?
No, I respect the legislative branch. They play an important role. I also understand the authorities of the executive branch, that we are different forms and different branches of government. My job is every single day, I am fighting for the people of this state. Every single day. That my sole responsibility is making sure that people from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore, that they are supported and that their ambitions are lifted up. And so I'm eager to work with the Democrats and the Republicans in the Maryland General Assembly. I'm very eager to work with, and I continue to work with all of our local elected officials, our county executives and our mayors and our county councils all around the state of Maryland to be able to make sure that their people are taken care of and supported. But they also are very clear that in me, I'm a person who believes in urgency. I'm a person who believes in doing it now. I'm a person who believes that we cannot wait to deliver and drive the kind of results that the people of our state really expect from us. And so I'm eager to work with them to make sure that we can deliver urgent results for the people of the state of Maryland.
Why shut the door on the potential of running for president of the United States? Can't you serve? You're up for re-election. Can't you still serve your next 4 years as governor of Maryland when re-elected, and still, because you're so young, still have the ambition of serving this country as president of the United States?
I'm because I'm passionate about what I'm doing. Listen, I didn't get into any of these jobs because I was looking for something else. I remember years ago, there were people who were talking about me running for Congress. And I said, I'm not interested in it. And there were people who were trying to convince me to run for Congress. And I said that there's nothing that anyone could have said to get me to run for Congress. Well, when I decided I wanted to run for governor, there were a lot of people who told me I shouldn't run for governor. They're like, you have no political experience. You've never run for anything before. You're running against statewide elected officials. You're running against the head of the Democratic Party. The Democrats were coming after me and putting millions of dollars to try to keep me from winning. And I said that there's nothing that anyone could tell me to get me not to run. When my heart is in something, and when I believe that God is leading me to do something, I follow that. And I truly believe that right now, the work that we are doing in Maryland is nation-leading work when it comes to driving work, wages, and wealth.
So your focus,
we can address the issue
in essence,
of
your focus, as it was in the past, is Maryland now, but your heart could change in the future. But that's not here yet. Governor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's really been a pleasure.
God bless you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and thank you.
The same to you, Governor. And thank you for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show.